Our scripture text this morning comes again from Luke chapter 2, and you'll find it on the screens, and I invite you to follow along as I read. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But an angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people." Did you hear that? I'll bring you great news that will bring you what? Great joy. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. And this will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger. Suddenly a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests." And when the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." I mean, can you imagine? You're just hanging out in your fields, and you're having a normal day, and there's no flashlights back in these days. You're in the fields what did you have, a stick? That's it. And all of a sudden, this bright thing appears in the sky, and their response was a healthy response. Do you remember what it was? Fear. Anytime something out of the ordinary shows up, our normal response is to say, this is terrible, I'm terrified. And so they freak out, and the angels do what angels do. They kind of just brush it off, and they go like this. They say, "Today, do not be afraid." That's what angels always say, and it never works. Do not be afraid. I don't know if that just changed them, but they say, "Do not be afraid. I bring you," because this is what angel means. It means messenger. "I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people." Today we're going to talk about joy. The very first words out of the angels' mouths when they announced the coming of Jesus to the shepherds was to tell them that we have something called good news of great joy. And I'm a pastor, and one of the awkward things about what I do, and this happened to me yesterday at a birthday party with my 8-year-old, is they always get to that awkward question where they're like, "Oh man, so what do you do? What do you do?" And every time I'm like, man, I wish sometimes that I was an accountant. I wish sometimes that I was just a teacher. And I have to bring up religion every time I meet someone. And they go, "So what do you do?" And I go, "I'm a pastor." And I always just for a moment think about what are they thinking when they think of what a pastor's job is. And in our world often what comes to mind is someone who's telling people how to live, someone who's judging people, someone who's trying to I don't even know. But if I got to tell people what I do, is I get to do for a living what the angels got to do that day, which is tell people good news. That's primarily what I do, is I just tell people good news. And so it's my privilege today to get to speak for just a few minutes, maybe just 2 hours, maybe 3, about joy, about good news, about why we do all this. And I was thinking hard about how can we talk about joy so that it's not just like a theoretical thing about joy. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you 3 quick things about Jesus that bring me joy, 9 things about liberty that bring me joy, and I just want to close with one quick story. So there's 3 things about Jesus that bring me incredible joy, and when I wake up in the morning, you should know, just like you, I get to decide if there's joy in that day or not. It doesn't change the fact that there's storms outside. The sun is always there, whether we acknowledge it or not, and joy is a choice that you can choose every single day depending on your perspective and how you approach it. When I think about my life, when I think about God, and one of the reasons why I can always have joy no matter what is because these things are always true. It brings me great joy to reflect on the way that Jesus came to us. I was listening to a podcast yesterday that was talking about, there was this massacre in Israel 2 months ago, and there's war going on in the world. And there's a lot of world religions out there that incite violence, or it's really easy to talk about violence in them. But when we talk about Jesus, he consistently refused to use force and violence to do anything. You know that, right? He could have built armies. He could have conquered things. He never did. He found 12 nobodies and said, "Let's start a church together." And above all, the way that he came demonstrates humility and not force. How did Jesus come? He came as a baby. That's like a 10 out of 10 difficulty dive in the Olympic sport of diving. It's like, I'm going to save the world, and I'm going to come down and do it, as a baby. How unusual that our God is so humble, that our God is so gentle, that our God comes to us in a way we could never expect. And I have joy because I have a God that inspires me with his humility. Another thing that God does that amazes me is he is a God that is relentlessly in pursuit of me. So I wake up in the morning and I can choose joy or I can not have joy. But one of the reasons why I always have joy is because when I wake up in the morning, I know that I have a God that is more passionate about loving me than I am loving myself. And I love myself a lot. But God loves me in a way I could never expect and never dream of. There's no place I could ever wander. There's no hole or ditch I could ever be stuck in. There's no mire, there's no darkness that God can't break into. And so one of the reasons why I can wake up in the morning every day and have joy isn't just because I have a God who's humble, but because I have a God that is relentlessly in love with me. I mean, that's an idea that just should knock your socks off. That he came down and he left heaven and he could have been comfortable up there for a very long time. If you gave me perfection in heaven and you said there's some struggling people down there, Pastor Chris would say 5 more minutes at least. I'm not ready. I'm comfortable. And the God of the universe said, I will let go of all of my dignity. I will let go of all of my comfort. I will give away all of my riches. I will die on a cross. I will suffer for you. Why? Because there is no end of the earth to which I wouldn't run to find my children that I love. And the God of the universe brings me joy because I have a God that fights for me. I have a God that reaches for me. I have a God that, but when I wake up, he's with me. When I go to bed, he's there with me. Every single place and every step and every breath I've ever taken, the God of the universe is there with me because he loves me. So we light a pink candle to remind ourselves that when I woke up this morning and thought it was an ordinary day just to get dressed and go through the motions, that actually it's a day where I walk with the living God of the universe every step that I take. But one other thing that brings me joy about Jesus especially is I'm never ashamed of him. You know, what do you do for a living? I'm a pastor. And there's messiness about the church. Churches are messy and they mess up, and the news loves to report it. But no one's ever been ashamed of Jesus. There's nothing Jesus ever said that I'm embarrassed of. There's nothing he ever taught that doesn't inspire me. His entire life, from the way that he came to the way that he died and the hope that he brings us in the resurrection, is something that every day when I wake up, I don't mind talking about him and I don't mind learning from him, and I want to walk with him every single day. I can have joy in my life every day because the God of the universe is someone that I want to know more. One of the greatest tests of anyone is if you get to know him a little bit, do you want to get to know him more, or are you done? Jesus is a never-ending fountain of joy and love for me. Our mission here at Liberty is to make wholehearted followers of Jesus. And we would not have picked that if we thought that Jesus was someone that we were ashamed of. But instead, he comes as a baby, and he grows up to give his life away, and everything that he did in between is something that I want to do every day of my life. And so as we pause to think about Christmas, and we light a joy candle, the way that he came, and who he was, and what he was willing to give up in pursuit of his love for all of his people. You don't get messages like that every day. So when the angels came and they said, it's my job to say, don't be afraid, I bring you great news of joy for all the people, they weren't messing around you all. It's real joy. It's real joy. And then it's really easy to talk about how, all right, there's joy in general, but what about joy in particular? Because when I woke up this morning, I was a little tired. And I had an 8-year-old with a cough, and we're giving her medicine in the middle of the night, and of course then I have to do what I have to do. She gets my spot in bed, and I go sleep in hers, and we survive. And it's really easy to wake up in the morning just stressed and exhausted with no joy. And I've been there. In fact, there's been whole seasons of my life where the location where my mind and heart were in joy seemed like there was 1,000 miles in between. But one of the things I've learned to do, and I just want to do with you for a few minutes, is remind ourselves that there are great things going on all around us. And I'm just going to share 9 from Liberty that I see all the time. First one is this, and this is a very unusual one, is we have graves out there. And my office is right outside of a cemetery in that white building. But this week I got to sit down with a few wonderful folks from Liberty, and this is what they do in their spare time. They walk around and they figure out who's in what spot, and who they were, and what they did. And one of the things that I am just amazed by about Liberty is that we have a tradition and we have a legacy of people that have come before us at Liberty that have been paving the way and investing in us. And that inspires me greatly. It inspires me greatly. We have Civil War vets out there. We've got all kinds of veterans. We've got the people that gave the land to this church. And very soon I'm hoping you'll be able to find all that online and read all about these folks. It's incredible. There might even be a few empty spots. And so talk to me after the service if you want to make a generous gift to the church and really are attached to this space. We've got a pathway out there too. But I love being a part of a church that has depth. You know, I'm not your first pastor and I won't be your last pastor. And you're not the only people that will ever grace this place. We are stewards of what God's given us, and we love it and we invest in it, but it's not about us and it's not for us. It's for the people that will come next. One of the things that's unique about Christianity is if we all died today in this building, God forbid, but if we did, it's not like Christianity just keeps going. It requires living people to pass on a living message to the next group of living people. And that's our purpose, and that's why we're here, and it's a privilege to be a part of a church that's centuries old, that's been passing on the faith because it matters, and because the next generation matters too. The second one is this, I don't know if you remember, but one of the things that gives me great joy is last week we set a record for number of kids on this stage. We had a pageant, and it was beautiful. And here's why it's doubly cool. Not just the numbers. Numbers can be up and down, and that gets messy. But, of course, these days we're just celebrating joyfully the fact that, there's hardly a seat, right? But last week, what was really special was that the leader of that ministry wasn't even here. She was taking a break, and it was well-deserved. And our staff here is so hardworking and incredible. It's wonderful. But we had all volunteers leading that. And so we had a group of all volunteers leading one of the most joyful and incredible things. And I was just sitting there almost in tears at the front thinking, this is something that brings me joy, Lord, to see ordinary people stepping up and serving in a way that says, God is alive in this place. And to see all those kids hearing the Christmas message and learning it for themselves, we're doing exactly what was done to us, and we're doing exactly what Jesus wants, and I'm so thankful for that. This week, number 3, something that brings me joy is I got to hang out with this group here called Top of the Hill Gang, TOHG. Top of the Hill Gang started 50 years ago thinking that they were at the top then. Not quite that far. But it's a group of our seniors that decided a long time ago that they didn't want to just fade into the distance, that they wanted to make sure that they were there for each other, that they were there for the church. And so I went to their Christmas party this week, and you'll never meet a group of older folks with more life in them than our Top of the Hill Gang. The ways that they serve Liberty, the ways that they love God, the way that they care for one another inspires me to no end. And so I just want to say thanks to those of you who are in that final third of life that have decided that that final third is going to be your best third. And it's where you're going to find a way to love and cherish all the great things God has given you. And so I walk into that room, and of course I'm almost half a century younger than many of them. And yet I fit right in because all I did was sit around tables and talk to people who wanted to tell me how wonderful God is and how thankful they are. And I thought to myself, this is exactly who I want to be when I get older. So thanks for being models for us, especially who are my age, of what it means to live a faithful life and to love Jesus all the way to the end. That's number 3. Number 4. We did this thing a few months ago called Breaking Bread. I don't know if you remember it, where we just said, hey, if anyone wants to start having dinner with one another and get to know people at the church, we're going to do this thing called Breaking Bread. Just fill out this form and sign up. We had over 100 people sign up at Liberty. I don't know if you know that. We had over 100 people that were willing to test this little pilot out with us to say, hey, you know what? I want to make sure that when I come to church, it's not just about me. I want to be getting to know people and connecting. One of our values here at Liberty is connection, because we believe that when you come to church, you shouldn't be invisible. And we also believe that you're not invisible to God, and you shouldn't be invisible to a church that loves you. And so we tried this out, and all throughout the last few months, I've gotten notes from people that said, hey, I just want to say thank you for pulling this together, because now when I come to church, there's people that I know. And they know who to sit next to on Sunday. And so I'm just so thankful that when we decided to create an experiment of connection at Liberty, what happened is it was like all these little things that were separate before were starting to come together. And we're going to keep leaning into that as we go into spring and into fall of the next year. But it's just awesome to see how the church is being the church. Even this morning, I walk in and one of our leaders comes up to me and says, "Hey, did you hear that this person had passed away last night?" No, I hadn't heard yet. But as I walked throughout the church, one of the things that I found was 7 people knew. And they all came up to me and asked me if I knew. And I'm like, you guys, I'm the last person to figure out what happens at Liberty. And that's okay, because you're loving each other. And you're getting connected to one another. And I think that that's one of the most beautiful things about the church. When the church started, it wasn't about having a pastor and then you all sit there and do nothing. It's true that I preach, but when it comes to actually being the church and loving one another, that's your primary task. And Liberty does it as well as any church I've ever seen. All right, number 5, because this could go on. I could speak for at least an hour on each one of these. Number 5, something that brings me joy at Liberty, is I walk in, and I don't know a soul at Liberty, right? Like, I don't know if you remember, but it wasn't very long ago where my little family flew on a plane and I drove my little dog in a minivan. No, we don't have a minivan, but we drove our little car and we show up here. We don't know anybody. But over the last year, I've had the privilege to work alongside such an incredible staff and a group of elected leaders here at Liberty that brings me so much joy. So I'm looking at you, Amy, and I'm looking at so many others. In fact, Jan's son, one of our staff people, was the one singing up here with a guitar. And so every day when I come to work, I never think to myself, man, I wish this struggle wasn't so big. I hate carrying it alone. Instead, the way it works at Liberty, which I'm thankful for, is I show up at work and there's like 8 people that are all rowing together, that are all doing incredible things for this church. And so I just get to say, do you even know this guy Steve kind of person? We have a great team here, and I'm so thankful to work alongside them. And then our elected leadership. Like, I'm looking right out there because the first person I saw when I walked in this morning, it was the finance chair of Liberty. By the way, that's the worst job you can have at a whole church. It is. But we have faithful leaders that are not just good at responding to email and getting things done, but their whole heart's in it. And I see them always lined up and always serving. And it inspires me to no end to get to work alongside so many great people here at this church. Tracy. Number 6. This is kind of special about Liberty. And I didn't expect it when I came here. But when I came in, every week we've got these things called deacons. And depending on what church you go to, deacon mean different things. But one of the things that happened this morning is before I even get here, there's someone opening doors, making coffee, passing out bulletins, and what they do is they show up before everybody else to serve because God has put it on their hearts to say, I'm going to use my gifts to make this church come alive, and I have joy in my heart because of you. And I just want to say thank you. For those of you that step up and serve that way, we all get to come to a church that we didn't build. Some of you did. I didn't. Generations that come didn't build that. We didn't build it. Often when we come for the first time to a church, we didn't do anything. We haven't even been a part of it yet. But we set the table. And our deacons are the people that show up early, set the table, so that people that don't even know what happens, because they're the behind-the-scenes people, people that don't even know what happens get to sit and hear a message of joy about the good news of Jesus and not have to stress about the details, because we have leaders that show up early to do that for them. That inspires me incredibly, and when you do that, you're the church. All right, number 7. Something that brings me joy about Liberty is the fact that I can't stop it from growing these days, and I've tried. But it's impossible. We don't know how we're going to deal with all the stresses that come with growth, and we don't know how we're going to manage a lot of the challenges that come. But this Sunday, next Sunday actually, we're announcing Honduras mission trip dates. And so that's coming. So those ministries are coming back alive again. In fact, even just this morning, I was talking to some folks that are right there. I call it the exit row, that main row in between. I was talking to some exit row people. And then I said, they're like, yeah, we love this church. This is so great. And I'm like, yeah, it's not that complicated because, we got great music. The message is endurable. And so you can make it. And they said, yeah, that's all good stuff, Chris, but what about missions? And I was like, man, this church has a longer checklist than I do. I love it. And so I was thankful to say, you know what, we are getting that going. In fact, right after church today, one of the things that is happening is we do this thing called Street Church, where I see emails that come in all week long about people that are making food and taking it downtown to those that are hungry. And it sounds like one of those ministries that whether we did it or not, we're not sure if it would matter. But trust me, it matters, because when a mom pulls up with 5 hungry kids in their car with sniffling noses and we're able to give them food for the week, it is like the best thing we could do. And so we have Street Church happening like now. We've got Honduras mission trips coming. Adopt a Family was just this thing that we did in the basement the last couple weeks. That's like a $30,000 fundraiser we do on the side. And we adopted more families than ever done in the past. And we have leaders that run those ministries. And we had Thanksgiving boxes that are happening just before. We're actually losing track of all the things we're doing because there's so much going on here. And I think to myself, this is a church that brings me joy because it's not about them. And they love serving, and they love giving, and it just blows my mind how generous you are. Generosity is one of our core values here, too, at Liberty. And when I look out at the church, all I see is generosity because your hearts are so big, and I'm astounded and amazed by it. Number 8. Last night at around 8 p.m., I get a text because I'm on this group chat for all of our teenagers here at Liberty, and one of the things that they did is they posted a picture of their high school youth group Christmas party. I don't know if you know, we've been going through a crazy time with that because our director of of youth ministry stepped away in early fall, and she took a new role. And so we were like, man, how are we going to do this? Because guess how easy it is to hire new folks these days. It's a challenge, just not only in the church but all throughout our culture. And so we said, man, we're going to have to figure out a way. And so here's what happened: is we had a few volunteer leaders step up and say to themselves, we're not going to let this transition period be a time where we let these kids fade. Because you know how easy that would be, right? We're waiting for leadership, and they said, no, we can't wait. And so every single weekend, what's happening is we have more junior hires meeting during Sunday mornings than we've had in like a decade plus here. And so our junior hires, one of the things we started was on Sunday mornings, instead of just kind of going over there into a basement, we launched a program over here, and now we have more junior hires than we've ever had, and it's astounding and inspiring. And the Christmas party, guess what? There's just as many kids as there were last year, if not more, and that's while we have no staff running it. It's not endurable. We have to make it work, but just seeing Abby up here singing, and all these youth participating in our church in incredible ways, and Riley, the way you were singing right here this last week, it's just a wonderful thing to see the way that our church leans into kids and youth and the way that they step up and serve. It brings me great joy to see that. And I've got a little one that's sitting with me in the beginning of the service. I should be very upfront about this. One of the reasons why we've moved the children's message more to the beginning of the service is because it's hard for me to worship with a 5-year-old on my lap. But I think to myself, I love having him there with me. And one day he's going to be a junior hire and a senior hire. And I want to make sure I'm at a church that has great ministries for him. And I love knowing that this is a church that's already doing it and leaning in and building it. And I'm thankful for that. Last one. Something that brings me joy is I was walking I was on Friday afternoon, I think I was over there. My office is in that white building. And I walked up to talk to the finance people and to just check in on various staff that meet up there. And I could hear someone on the roof like knocking on it, walking around on the roof, and I was like, man, I'd be terrified to walk on this roof. Do you have any idea how old this building is? And he's walking around, and he was some insurance guy that was checking on roof damage and looking at different things. And as I'm walking out, I met him and started talking to him, and he gives me a pack. He says, hey, you need to give this to your property guy. I don't know anything about insurance. But anyway, I hand it to the people that know a lot about it. That's my job. And as I'm talking to him, one of the things he says, this is a really interesting place. Never been on this campus before, right? Never been here. And I go, yeah, the building that you were walking in is like hundreds of years old. Like that chapel, I don't know if you've ever been in it. It's astounding. We had a memory service in it this last Wednesday for folks that had lost loved ones. And that was an amazing service. And Pastor Vicky, who runs that, is an absolute gem here at Liberty. And our deacons who were there love it too. But one of the things that I was telling him was about the history of this place. And I was like, oh yeah, if you think that's special, have you seen what we're doing right now? And as I was walking in this morning, one of the people caught me, and they said, hey, Chris, isn't this special? Do you all realize what we're doing right now? Just take a look around you and realize that that you could be anywhere on Sunday morning right now. You could be anywhere. In fact, I was driving past the YMCA. I know that half of our city is at a basketball tournament. They're at the YMCA. There's no place I'd rather be than in the house of the Lord, worshiping God with a group of people that love Him too, with you in this place. And it just so happens we get to worship God in possibly one of the most beautiful spaces that you'll find anywhere in the world. I don't take any of this for granted. I'm so full of joy. And when we light that candle, you all, I'll end with this last story. Is I met with a couple this week who, she has terminal cancer. You know, it's very hard for a couple to go through that. You know, the guy always thinks that he's going to die first, right? But in this case, it's the opposite. And I was like, man, I have to preach on joy this week, right after I'm talking to a couple that's about to experience incredible pain. That's not an easy thing to do. So I'm talking to them, and one of the things that I noticed as I was meeting with them is that they weren't that sad. They were really broken in a lot of ways, but they had like more hope than I did. And here I'm the pastor of a church, and I get to be around people with even more faith than I could imagine. And one of the things she kept saying was, she says, I'm okay because I know where I'm going. I'm okay because I know where I'm going. And I know he's going to be okay. And they kept talking, and they were holding each other's hands, and here they were in the middle of so much pain. And I was reminded of Nehemiah 8:10, one of my favorite verses. It says, the joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength. You know, Jesus, it says about him that even as he was approaching the cross, he never lost his joy. You know, when you picture Jesus, is Jesus happy or sad? You know, Protestant churches always have empty crosses. Catholic churches have Jesus on the cross. I think those are sadder ones. But if I asked the kids, is Jesus happy or sad, I wonder what they would have said. And one of the kids in row 2 yelled out happy just now. The reason why you can say that Jesus is happy is because he would go through any pain, and he did. He'd go through any pain knowing that at the end of that journey is joy, is light, is resurrection, is hope, is peace, is unity, is everything you could ever imagine. And so I get to stand here like the angels and tell you good news of great joy, that in the middle of all your suffering and in the middle of dark days, in the middle of all these things, the Lord of the universe is so committed to you that he left heaven to come down as a child to show us the way, so that in our dark times, Jesus would walk with us and never leave us alone, and remind us that joy is there all the time for you and for me this Christmas. And so we give thanks to God for the ways that he's with us. Will you bow your head and pray with me? God, we give you thanks for all the things that are going on, and we ask for your forgiveness for the ways that oftentimes we forget to give thanks. We forget to remind ourselves of what's really real. God, in our dark days, when we're sitting around with sheep on a hillside, would your angels continue to break into our lives and declare great news to us when we need it? We humbly ask, God, that you would restore in us a sense of joy, so that as your chosen people, we could go out into the world in a way that reflects the kind of good news that you came to bring. And we pray all these things in Jesus' powerful name, and all God's people said, Amen.